The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 938, coming to you on Monday the 27th of May 2019. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, Show Me Your Motion. But before getting into that topic, a few preliminary remarks. Firstly, and on a serious note, my condolences go out to all those who have suffered recent bereavements. And secondly, on behalf of the Spiritual Baptist groupings in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I would like to thank one and all for participating in National Spiritual Baptist Day activities yesterday, and to those institutions which facilitated our march, namely the police band, thank you very much, and our service at Victoria Park, thank you to all the Victoria Park authorities. Now, on the same note, we of St. Elizabeth Spiritual Baptist Church, Belmont, would be observing the year night for our past patriarch Edmund John. We will be having a year night service next week, Wednesday night, the 5th of June, at St. Elizabeth, beginning at 7 o'clock, and we are inviting one and all to come and commemorate with us the 1 year's passing of our late patriarch. And let me remind members of the Spiritual Baptist Archdiocese that our men's conference will be held on Saturday the 15th of June at St. John's Spiritual Baptist Church, Sign Hill, beginning at 9 in the morning. So the men's conference at 9, and there will be other conferences coming up shortly thereafter, which I will tell you about. But all Spiritual Baptist men, please make a special effort to attend our men's conference, the first ever in the history of the Spiritual Baptist faiths in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And finally, for preliminaries, I'd like to wish my Auntie Emily of Leo, Mrs. Emily Ballantyne, a belated happy 96th birthday, which she celebrated yesterday with all the families in Leo, and she was extremely pleased. I called her. I could not attend because I was at the park as taking part in the Spiritual Baptist National Day service, but I did call my aunt and wish her happy birthday. And she was so glad that of her 3 children, she had 2 of them present with her in Leo yesterday, namely Sandra, who now lives with her on a full-time basis, and her only son, Junior. And good night to you, Professor Junior Ballantyne of Cornell University, Professor of Men's Studies. No, that was just an in-family joke. Night, Junior. Night, Sandra. Night, Auntie Emily. Okay, show me your motion. I want to begin the program, the topic, by drawing your attention to last week's edition of the Searchlight newspaper. And this is a newspaper you should keep. Don't throw it away. If you have it, put it up. It will come in very handy when you want to do a little research later on. The headline article, Eustace to hang up boots. And above the quotation, you can't run if you can't walk. I read this article with some astonishment, but I wouldn't comment on it at this time and in this program, perhaps later on. But all of you should read this article. I will just quote you one quotation. Beyond doubt, Mr. Eustace is not going to contest another election. I can't say it is official. It's common sense. And I can't recall hearing an announcement of such magnitude from a political party accompanied by the words, I can't say it's official. If it's not official, why say it? But leave that for another time. As we go into the newspaper, we see on page 8 an extremely well put together editorial. Now, I must say that I read all of the editorials in the Searchlight newspaper because they're always well structured and full of intelligence, and I want to commend the editor. The headline for this editorial is, quote, "The focus should be on electoral reform, not on political grandstanding." And I want to commend the article, and again, I commend it to you, the reader. If you have your Searchlight newspaper, read that editorial again. If you didn't see the Searchlight for the weekend, last Friday, try and get one. And then my attention was specifically drawn to an article, a letter in fact, on page 10, written by Mr. Kingsley de Freitas. Kingsley, as all Vincentians should know, is a taxi driver. He operates at the International Airport at Argyle. Formerly, he was at E.T. Joshua. His father, William de Freitas, deceased, was popularly known by the nickname Born to Lose. And Kingsley has been a very close friend of mine over the years and a very strong supporter of the NDP. In fact, he began his letter, and I really think you should read it because his letter is called An Open Letter to the Leader of the Opposition. And this is how Kingsley de Freitas begins his letter. Quote, "I am a New Democratic Party supporter, and I am tired of waiting on the NDP to become government. 19 years in opposition is a very long time, and sad to say, the way the NDP has been operating in the last few months, it appears that they will be in opposition even longer." This is coming from a die-hard NDP grassroots supporter. And I hope the leadership of the party would read this letter very carefully and take the appropriate action. There was a time, I think about less than 2 years ago, when Kingsley de Freitas used to write regularly in the newspapers. And then in one letter he said he's not going to write anymore. He's finished with it. And when I met him and inquired, he said he was tired of the negative comments some people were reacting with to his articles. And apparently people of his own party. Now Kingsley has been saying it like it is, and whether you agree with him or don't agree, he speaks his mind. He doesn't talk with water in his mouth. If he feels that he wants to praise the Prime Minister, and say, he will praise him and say why. And if he wants to criticize the government, he will say so. Kingsley is a plain-speaking young man whom I commend, but this article should be a wake-up call for the opposition New Democratic Party. The article continues on page 13. And I chuckled when I read Kingsley's letter and came over to the concluding paragraphs. And in one of the concluding paragraphs of his letter, Kingsley writes, questions for Dr. Friday. Why are you afraid to remove Miss London from the New Times program? He's referring to Miss Margaret London. Are you satisfied with the way she handles herself on the program? Are you aware that Miss London is destroying the NDP? And that is the sentence that really got my attention. Mr. Kingsley de Freitas, strong supporter of the NDP for years, before Margaret London came on the scene, is saying to the leader of the party, leader of the opposition, in this open letter, are you aware that Miss London is destroying the NDP? My only comment at this stage is to say that I am fully in agreement with that sentiment, that question that Kingsley de Freitas has asked. But I want you to, if you skimmed over it or if you didn't see it, go to the Searchlight newspaper and read the whole letter. It should cause the NDP hierarchy to take notice. All right, that was my introduction to Show Me Your Motion. Over the past year and a half, almost, we have heard and read quite a lot about no confidence motions. Beginning in January 2018. I wish to add one dimension to the public debate. And I speak from a position of some knowledge about these matters because these are matters I had to study in my legal studies. And these are matters which I have actually dealt with in real life as a member of the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. To recap, and I didn't want to draw attention to it, but you will see in the Searchlight newspaper I have a very lengthy article which I thank the editor for repeating. But to recap, in January 2018, the opposition brought a motion of no confidence in the government. Excuse me. The opposition tabled a motion of no confidence in the government. The government countered by amending that no confidence motion and transformed the motion into a motion of confidence. Now, if you read books on parliamentary procedure, you will see that they normally refer to all motions of no confidence as motions of confidence. But it does not matter if you label it a motion of no confidence or a motion of confidence. The label does not matter. What matters would be the contents of the motion, that is, the debate that takes place on the motion, and most importantly, the result of the voting on the motion when the debate is finished and the Speaker calls for a division, which is calls for members of Parliament to vote on the motion. Now, when an opposition tables a motion of no confidence, that opposition is alleging not that the opposition has no confidence in the government. Let me repeat. A motion of no confidence filed by any opposition in any democratic country, any country with the parliamentary democracy system such as we have, that motion of no confidence is not saying that the opposition has no confidence in the government, because by definition, an opposition has no confidence in the government. That is why it's called opposition. It doesn't support the government, otherwise it wouldn't be opposition. So whenever a parliament is constituted, we know that those on the opposition side do not have confidence in those on the government side. That is taken for granted. So, what does a motion of no confidence say? This is the crucial difference. A motion of no confidence is saying that the House, the whole Parliament, has lost confidence in the government. And it is important that you grasp that point. So an opposition motion would normally end with the words, "Be it resolved that this Honorable House has lost confidence in the government." Therefore, an opposition motion is alleging that the government has lost the majority it used to have. If you go back to when a government is formed, what qualifies a political party to form government? Well, a political party is entitled to form the government when it has won the majority of constituencies, the majority of seats at general elections. After general elections, the seats are counted. One party would have won, one party would have lost. And there may be minority parties, but one party has emerged from elections with the majority of seats in the parliament. I'm speaking about elected seats, not senators, because when you have a motion of no confidence, senators cannot vote. It's only the elected members who can vote. And when you say that a government has lost its majority, you mean it has lost the majority of elected members. A senator could always resign from the government. No big thing. But if an elected member on the government side resigns, that is something else, because it means the government would have one seat fewer. And as we have it here, 8 on the government side, 7 on the opposition side, if one member on the government side resigns and indicates that he is going to sit with the opposition, it means the opposition would then have 8 seats and the government would be left with 7, which means that the Governor General will be entitled to remove that government with its 7 seats from office because the opposition will have more seats than the government. Therefore, when a no confidence motion is brought by an opposition, the opposition is alleging in the motion that the government has lost its majority. In other words, it is saying that somebody who was on the government side recently has now decided to resign from the government, or more than one. And therefore, the motion is saying that in this new situation, the government no longer has the confidence of the House, meaning it no longer controls the majority of seats, elected seats in the House. And when that happens, a government loses its right to govern. That is what happened in St. Kitts. That is what happened recently in Guyana. You recall years ago, there was a big impasse in St. Kitts when persons resigned from the government side and indicated they wish to support the opposition. And the government refused to have a meeting of parliament called for a no confidence motion to be debated because the government knew that if a no confidence motion had been debated when the vote was taken, the government knew it would not have enough seats to remain in the government. And that is why myself and others, including Mr. Eustace, particularly the leader of the St. Vincent opposition, criticized the government of St. Kitts for refusing to have the Speaker call a meeting of the House to discuss an opposition no confidence motion. It was clearly, in my view, against the Constitution for the government to carry on when it had lost its majority by all accounts, given the resignation of persons from the government. Recently in Guyana, you had a resignation from the government, and the government refused to do anything about it, and the matter went to the court, and the court ruled that the government no longer can remain in office. Therefore, when an opposition brings a no confidence motion against a government, it has to know that there is somebody who is about to cross the floor or has crossed from the government side. In my analysis, there are 2 kinds of no confidence motions. One, genuine no confidence motions, that is, when you know that somebody has left the government, depriving the government of its majority. And secondly, strategic no confidence motions. That is, a no confidence motion brought in fulfillment of a political strategy, where nothing has changed on the government side, but as a strategy, as a tactic, you want to get at the government, you want to go to parliament to air some criticisms of the government and so on. So remember my analysis, genuine no confidence motions, which is when somebody has actually resigned from the government, or strategic no confidence motions, which you bring for political purposes. Now, where there is a genuine no confidence motion, that is where you know somebody has left the government, then the government has a duty to have parliament convene And if it is shown by the votes that they are short of a majority and the Speaker certifies that the government no longer has a majority, that government should resign. And if it doesn't resign, it should be removed from office by the head of state. That is, if the no confidence motion is genuine, if it is bona fide, if it is real. But if a no confidence motion is merely strategic, that is, nobody has moved from the government side, but you bring the no confidence motion as a political strategy to get into Parliament to debate certain issues, and you might be genuinely concerned about them, then a government is entitled to react to your strategic no confidence motion by adopting their own strategy to deal with your strategic no confidence motion. So what happened in January 2018 is that the opposition in this country filed a no confidence motion. But it was not a genuine no confidence motion because there was no indication that anybody had left the government. It was a strategic no confidence motion. And the government was entitled to treat it as a strategic maneuver and deal with it by their own strategic counter maneuver. That is all that happened. Now, final point I want to make. Even if the government amends your no confidence motion and makes it a motion of confidence, that does not prevent the opposition from lambasting the government in Parliament in the debate, because you have gone there to publicize certain grievances. And you know that when the vote is eventually taken, you know you would lose because the government still has a majority. So when you bring a strategic no confidence motion, it's not with the intention or the expectation that you will win. You know you would lose. You bring it to air certain grievances and to highlight certain things to the public. Therefore, if the government counters with a counter strategy, you still go to Parliament as the opposition, and all the notes you had gone there prepared to speak about, you go and speak about them. That's your opportunity. You don't refuse to go and say, well, the government has made our motion of no confidence into a motion of confidence. They have hijacked our motion, and therefore we cannot speak on their motion. Come on. You speak on what you are prepared to speak about. You've decided to go and give the government a rough time. Go and do that. Because you have brought a strategic no confidence motion, not a genuine one. Nobody on the government side has resigned. And therefore, you know, at the end of the day, when the debate is finished, the voting will be one way, namely a majority on the government side. And your motion of no confidence is bound to be defeated because the government still has more elected members than you in the opposition. But even with the government's amendment, you have the opportunity to go to Parliament and speak about all the things you had planned to speak about if your no confidence motion was the motion before the House. In other words, show me your motion and I will show you why your position is right or wrong. That is all from this program of The Law and You. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday, DV, for another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, and remember, get hold of last week's Searchlight And if you have it and you haven't read it carefully, read it very carefully and put it up. It will come in handy later on when you want to check certain things. So, may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You. A look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You. Presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.